And on the message of shopping local this weekend on the 6th and 7th, we have artisan event or artisan market at the community center. And I know Sam and her team have put together fun activities for each day. So do your shopping in town. We got some local artists. I want to thank Yountville Fit, the Welcome Center, and our community center for taking food barrels. We had over 400 pounds of healthy foods to go to the food bank, so that was great to make it convenient for our local people to make donations, and thank you for them. Fire Station 12 is all lit up for the holidays. If you've seen it, they're doing their annual Toys for Tots drive on the 18th. They've got hot chocolate and kids, and it's really fun when the wine train goes by because it is all lit up and festive. So, and they're stopping to wave, and the people at the station wave. So join if you can. One more plug for Molly's Angels. They're selling tickets right now for their crab feed on Saturday, July 24th. It's early bird tickets right now. And lastly, happy birthday.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Okay.
Thank you very much. Any other council member announcements? I will move on. We have a proclamation and a recognition. So let's start with the introduction of our new town employee. So.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm John Ferringer, Public Works Director, and I'm proud to introduce our newest Public Works employee, Nicholas DiPriola. Recently joined the town as the Utility Operations Manager. He comes to us with several years of experience in wastewater treatment operations, most recently supervising an 18 million gallon regional facility in the Coachella Valley. Ours is a 500,000 gallon facility, so there's a big difference there. He holds a grade 5 wastewater certification, which is the highest wastewater cert that you can get in the state. He has an advanced water treatment 3 certificate, an AS in water technology, and a background focused on plant operations, process optimization, and supporting operators in the field. And so that sounds like a perfect fit for what we need. What brings him to Yountville is the opportunity to work in a smaller community-focused environment where he can have a positive impact on the community and be a part of our close-knit team. And he's excited to settle into Northern California and become one of the Northern California people. So with that, I introduce Nicholas. You will see him around town.
Come on up, Nick. We got to see you on camera, so you got to at least say hello and thank you very much to your boss. Yeah.
Hi. Thank you very much. I'm just very excited and humbled to be, part of this great team. My name's Nicholas DiPriola.
All right. Well, welcome to a great staff, a great town, and we hope you have a good time when you're working hard. So, thank you very much for coming.
Definitely. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you.
And now I'd like to ask Celia to come meet me at the podium for a proclamation. So this is always one of our fun proclamations, and I think the council is always very excited to be able to give this out. This is a proclamation recognizing the Yountville town employees through a paid holiday closure in 2025. Whereas during the August 5th, 2025 Yountville Town Council meeting, the Town Council approved the closure of town offices to the public during the winter holiday break from December 22nd to December the 29th, and whereas the Town Council wishes to express gratitude and thanks for the town employees' hard work and dedication to the community throughout the year, and therefore would like to provide paid holiday closure days for benefited town employees scheduled to work during the winter holiday break as a holiday thank you to staff. Now, therefore, let it be resolved that I, Margie Moeller, Mayor, on behalf of the Town Council and our community, express our sincere appreciation to town staff for their excellent work this year and their dedicated service to the residents of Yountville. And 1, the town will close town offices during the winter holiday break on December 22nd, 23rd, and 26th, in addition to the regularly scheduled holiday closure on December 24th and 25th, 2025. And 2, the town will pay benefited employees scheduled to work on the additional days of December 22nd, 23rd, and 26th, 2025, and 3, benefited employees who must work during the winter holiday break as determined by their department head will receive pay for the holiday closure date in addition to pay for any hours worked. 4, the paid holiday closure dates are not holidays, personal days, or vacation days, and do not vest with the employees receiving this benefit. And 5, benefited employees scheduled to work during the town's winter holiday break shall use the paid holiday closure days only on December 22nd, 23rd, 26th, 2025. Sounds like there's a lot of legal reasons in here. But anyway, the town council really appreciates everything that you do for us as well as our residents and our businesses. So thanks very much. Okay.
I will just express on behalf of staff to mayor and council, thank you so much for this extraordinary gift. It is a very kind expression of appreciation, and I know that all staff is truly grateful. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and congratulations all to our staff. Now it's time for public comment that's on anything that is not on our agenda for today. Anybody like to come up and speak to us? Just come up and state your name, please.
Sure. Ashley Tencher, and I'm speaking to you today with my cyclist's cap on. With Yountville's paving improvements, we gained more clearly delineated bike lanes. I request the town's advocacy to ensure safe and accessible roadways. One mitigatable risk is the staging of the Upper Valley disposal service bins in bike lanes. And I'd like to share 3 related examples. The first is a Napa success story. The town of Napa and Napa Recycling and Waste Services have put a lot of focus into certain paths where their safety is of greatest concern. One section is Trower between Highway 29 and Vintage High School for obvious reasons. And every single one of those bins has a bilingual sticker on top of it, reminding people not to put them in the bike lanes. And I've traveled it twice with Focus, and 100% of them are not in the bike lanes. So they have worked that out in that stretch of road, and I'm really proud of them. And it's not accidental. The second example is an example from Greater Yountville, and this is more of a work in progress. I've been communicating directly as a cyclist with Upper Valley regarding Zinfandel Lane, Oakville Crossroads, and Yountville Crossroads, because we do have issues of bins in bike lanes. So in response to my communication and their great focus on safety, and they have replied to me, which I give them a lot of credit for, there are now bilingual stickers on some of those bins. So I want to let you know that Upper Valley has these stickers in 2 languages. And now that we have our beautiful new lanes, thank you very much for the pavement and these bike lanes, especially on Washington, we have a work in progress that needs some attention, and that's in northern Noyo. So we have a lot of bins that are in the bike lanes every Monday morning. So I think we should keep them clear. So I would just love your attention with that, especially Hillary, as you partner with Upper Valley. They'll know about my letters as it relates to our county roads. And I think it's a kind of safety first approach, and that we really pay attention to all of the active travelers and don't give, highest priority to cars. We remember the cyclists. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comment. Yes, you can ask a question. Sure, thanks.
So these bins, how big are the bins? I'm trying.
They're just like your bins.
Oh, okay. So there are people leaving the bins, not so much Upper Valley. Who leaves the bins in the?
Oh, sorry, the customers.
Okay, I just want to be sure. Not
Yeah.
that Upper Valley can't.
No, and Upper Valley, yeah, and they've given me the feedback when they place them. There are some times that they try to extend them off the bike lane. If they can, they pick them up on the bike lane and try to place them back. But there's not always that clearance, so there has to be a plan B. Like we talked about Oak and Vine, we talked about exactly where those bins are going. They're going in the property. They're not going on the crossroads. And every single time you see a new project, it's worth asking But I think Noyo and Northern Yonge Street are kind of the focus right now, and that it's just been done. So it's an active topic now for people to sort of reconsider where they put their bins.
All right, thank you. Anybody else want to come up and address the council for anything that's not on the agenda today? Seeing none, I will ask the council for a motion and a second to approve the consent calendar, and then we'll have any discussion before we vote.
I move to approve the consent calendar.
We have a motion, and
I'll second.
Councilmember Reeves just seconded that. So do we have any discussion from the council, or do we have any public comment on our consent calendar today? Seeing none of either, I will ask, when we just do the roll call, or you want to do that?
A voice vote is fine.
Okay.
Thank you.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed, any abstain? We've just approved our consent calendar for today. So we have two guest presentations. The first one is the annual comprehensive financial report for fiscal year ending June 30th, 2025. Cecilia, you're going to give us an introduction? As soon as you
Yes.
get your microphone going.
Yes, think it's working? Okay. Thank you. Good afternoon, Mayor and Town Council. We are pleased to present to you today the Town of Yountville's annual comprehensive financial report for fiscal year ended June 30, 2025. Joining us this afternoon is Oksana Humatini, audit supervisor with Siobhan and Associates, the town's auditing firm. Oksana has been part of the town's auditing firm for a number of years now. Auditing team for a number of years now, working closely with Sheldon Siobhan, the firm's managing partner, whom you have seen present this report in the past. We are happy to have Oksana here today to discuss the report and the results of the town's annual audit. So I will go ahead and turn the presentation over to her, and once she has completed the PowerPoint presentation, we will open it up for questions.
Thank you, Celia. Hello, my name is Oksana Hamutini, and I'm an audit supervisor with Siobhan and Associates. It's my pleasure to be here and to present the fiscal year 25 audit results. Let's see if I can. No, I got it. We will start with the high-level overview of the audit process, then we'll move into the financials, and then we'll conclude our presentation with the most anticipated part, the audit opinion. Our audit was conducted with generally accepted auditing standards and generally accepted governmental auditing standards, which point A, it's the basic auditing standards, and the generally accepted governmental auditing standards differ a bit by requiring an additional report and requirements on the considerations of the town's internal controls over financial report and compliance. So basically, we test both the town's internal controls and then the compliance, but we don't opine on that, so you won't see a separate opinion, but there is a report. Then our objective as an audit firm is to express an opinion on the financial statements. In order for us to express that opinion, we need to obtain a reasonable assurance on that your financial statements are free from material misstatements, whether due to fraud or error. And in order, hold on a second. So reasonable assurance, I want to just talk a little more about it. It's reasonable. It's not an absolute. It's not 100% assurance. So therefore, misstatements may still exist that were not detected. In performing the audit, we identify and assess all risks of material misstatement, and basically we adjust and design our audit to respond to those risks. So that means that our audit is risk-based audit. Then I'll return to the concept of materiality just to expand a little more on that. So as I already mentioned, in order to express an opinion, we must obtain reasonable assurance on whether the financial statements are free of material misstatement. So materiality is a very complex concept, and it's also basically it's a judgment area for an auditor. We determine materiality during our planning phase of the audit, but we don't necessarily stick to this materiality. It may change during the audit process, depending, let's say we identify new risks, and materiality may decrease, which means the sampling will be larger. That's not the case with Yountville. So then let's talk a bit about the internal controls. As I already mentioned, that it's basically internal controls required by GAGAS, and we're required to obtain an understanding on internal controls relevant to the audit. However, as I already mentioned, we do not opine on your internal controls. Let's see, and I concluded on standards and responsibilities, and we're moving to the next slide. Here you can see the required components of the annual financial report, and it consists of the management's discussion and analysis that is prepared by the management, and we don't provide opinion on that. However, we do audit the information that is included into MD&A. Then you'll see basic financial statements that have actually two sets of statements incorporated into them. Which one would be the government-wide financial statements and then the fund financial statements. And then you'll see the notes to the financial statements. I forgot to press that. Then you'll see the notes to the financial statements supporting the basic financial statements. And that is a basic GASB requirement. Since you're doing ACFR, it's much more complex. Next slide. And here you can see the statement of net position. So the statement of net position presents governmental activities separately from business type activities. And you also can see a dual year presentation, which you see the numbers for 2024 and then 2025. And the statement basically is presented where the way you read it, it's the assets plus deferred outflow of resources, less liabilities, less deferred inflow of resources, and then it equal to net position. And let's talk about the governmental activities total net position. In fiscal year 2024, the total net position for governmental activities was 59.83 million, and it increased to 63.46 million in 2025. For business type activities in 2024, the total net position was 20,000,036, and then it increased to 21.82 million. So in total, the total town's assets and deferred outflows of resources exceeded the liabilities and deferred inflow of resources by $85.28 million. So it's very good. And I'm moving to next slide. A summary of changes in fund balance. Here you can see that this statement presents major funds separately from non-major governmental funds. General fund is always major fund, and then you can see that there are also capital projects fund, debt service fund, and then Measure T fund. And non-major governmental funds are presented in the aggregate. The total revenues for the general fund were 16.23 million in fiscal year 23. The total expenditures were 11.96, and that's before the transfers out of 3.5 million, leading us to ending fund balance of $15.62 million. And then total governmental funds and then fund balances were 25.75 million. Oh, that's tiny. Here you go. And we'll expand a little more on the components of the fund balance for general fund only. And you'll see the comparison in numbers for 2025 and then 2024. So the fund balance consists of the non-spendable, restricted, committed, assigned, and then unassigned fund balances. I'm not going to define all of them. We can look at the general fund reserve for emergency of 3.17 in 2025. That number represents 20% of the general fund operating expenditures. So 20%, it's a good number, it's an excellent number, and we see that, basically entities of similar size, towns of similar size have very similar numbers for reserves, for emergencies. Then the very last would be the unassigned fund balance, which in fiscal year 24 was 5.8 million, and then in fiscal year 25 it increased to 5.88 million. And then the total fund balances in fiscal year 24, it was 14.85 million, and it increased, again, it's general fund only. It increased in 2025 to $15.62 million. And I actually have, I think it's an increase of 5.22%, something like that. And I'm off to the next slide. Here you can see the capital assets schedule. It presents governmental activities and business type activities separately. I do not see any large changes, for the exception maybe of the construction in progress, which you see in 2024 had a balance of 5.87 million, and then in 2025 it decreased to 1.91, which is due to the projects being completed and transferred out of the CIP to buildings. And you can see the buildings balance went up to 17.72. And just to mention, the capital assets are presented net of depreciation and amortization. Okay, next. The next schedule is long-term liabilities for governmental activities. I'm not going to go into the detail, but I'll mention the net pension liability that had a slight decrease in fiscal year 25, with the ending balance being $4.28 million. And then the net OPEB liability actually converted into the asset of 26.9, that's in thousands actually here, which means your net OPEB liability is fully funded. Then we'll move to the long-term liabilities for business activities. Very similar situation, the net pension liability decreased slightly, with the balance at June 30th, 2025 being $1.8 million, and then your net OPEB liability actually converted into the asset, and it's fully funded. And you can see there is a reclassification of net OPEB asset on a separate line. The audit results, no exceptions in audit opinions, no material weaknesses, no disagreements with management, and no significant passed-on adjustments. And that's Sheldon's seal of approval. He wanted me to mention that, you know that. I just want to say big thank you to your finance team. It's very easy to work with them. Everything is presented timely, hence we're able to wrap up that audit quickly, efficiently, and that's usually not the case with most of our clients. So a big thank you, Celia and Kyle. Any questions?
Thank you very much. We'll bring, does the council have any questions? Yes.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation, very clear, and also, as always, thank you to Celia. But I just wanted to ask on the long-term liabilities, I see I'm just looking at the 2 pages, one long-term liabilities, government activities, and one long-term liabilities, business activities.
Correct.
And I would guess the compensated asset absences line, the 187,000, or let's see, as of June 2025, it was 200,000 more or less, and then on the other page it's 49,000. So this is, I think, vacation pay that we
And
would.
is it for a business type? Looks like, right?
Right.
Let's see.
So I guess
Yeah.
I'm guessing this is vacation pay that we will owe eventually.
That
or
is
has
correct.
accrued.
That's vacation.
So why does it appear twice? That's what I'm trying to figure out. What is the difference between the lines on the government
It's
activities
governmental
and the
activities
business?
versus business activities. So that's why we have to separate it between the two.
Okay, and the business activities would be
Water,
wastewater,
sewer.
that
Yeah.
sort of, okay,
Yeah.
thank you. That was my only question.
Yeah.
It was very clear, though. Thank you.
Any other questions?
I don't see any other questions. So thank you very much, and I'll now go to public comment. So
Thank you for having me here.
thank you very much. It's always I'll save my comments for. Does anybody from the public want to come up and make a comment about our audit report? Seeing none, I will bring it back. Do we need this is a receive and file, correct? Okay. Any comments from the council? I'll just say that I know it seems all very simple and everything is good, but there's so much work that goes into this kind of behind the scenes to make it all just really look this much. And I really want to give a lot of thanks to all the staff for everything that they really do to, they do a lot with really very few dollars. So, and it's always nice to hear, especially an auditor saying, wow, this looks really good, and this looks really good, and that was really easy. So just, thank you very much. And it's really great to see that the long-term planning that we've had for things like OPEB, and I think we start seeing it incrementally for our pensions as well. We have really done a tremendous job on funding these important benefits for our staff. So thank you very much. So any other comments? No, just so we'll go ahead and receive and file the audit report for this year. Thank you very much, everybody. Okay, let's move on to our second presentation. We are going to receive an informational presentation from KNN Public Finance, the town's financial advisory firm, regarding the future financing options for the Yountville Commons project, something we've been waiting for and is now here. So thank you very much. Brad, are you going to give us a
Yeah, I'll do a quick
introduction?
intro. I'll reintroduce Melissa Schick from KNN, who we selected as our financial advisor, I want to say 6 months ago-ish. And it's been great working. Never worked with KNN, and Melissa and her team. She has a team of number crunchers. Have been really great to work with. And then obviously we have Celia. We'll keep singing Celia King's praises, and the finance team who have gotten us to this point. Today is just an update. There's no decisions being made. So, in terms of the first bullet, you're all aware, but for purposes of the, watchers at home and most people in the audience that I think also know where we're at with the process for the Commons, I'll just remind you that in January, the council will be considering the the project entitlements in the CEQA. We will actually publish the staff report for ZDRB this Friday. And so ZDRB has their hearing on the project entitlements a week from today at 5:30 here. So that whole packet, which you'll see on Friday in our website, will be very similar. And the only changes that would be reflected would be ZDRB comments. So this is we've already approved in the consent agenda sort of canceling the first meeting in January, creating a special meeting on the second Tuesday, which is January 13th. So we anticipate that the council will review all the project entitlements. And after this presentation, actually John and Aaron will give a quick presentation on kind of where we're at with CEQA or with project entitlements as well as design build. I think the design build piece of it is critical in the numbers you won't see tonight, which are the cost numbers. And I think what you will see tonight, we used to call it sources and uses analysis. I don't know if that term is still used, but these are the sources of funding that you have available to you. How that would be used beyond the money that's been budgeted for the planning and the acquisition and the work we've done to date would really, of course, depend on what the costs of the project are. So we do anticipate starting to get those numbers, but the design build process, which John will update you on later, will provide clarity once we have what we call best value numbers from actual contractors versus estimates from designers or engineers, which are useful, but at the same time, not reliable. I think that we need to have real numbers. And with the goal of February being when we are able to present to the council, all the information. We don't anticipate making a decision the day you see everything, because I know that will be consuming. So we're kind of looking at February as being another month that we would do outreach and make sure that we're responding to any questions and concerns you might have, and then come back in March with what would hopefully be a decision point based on what you're going to get previewed this afternoon. And I think it's a good segue from the audit, because I will have Celia sort of start before Melissa moves into her portion, majority of the deck. It's hard, I will tell you, for me, I've learned to speak audit, or I've learned to speak GATSB to some degree, but it's always hard because it's different language than budgeting. And so you look at, business, and you look at government, you look at how things are categorized, it gets to be tricky. I think the one thing that you've heard, which I think I'll let Celia, bless you, by the way.
Sorry.
I will let Celia sort of take this baton, is this term unassigned fund balance. And so that term generally means, what general fund money you have that has not been assigned to anything, whether that's project or budget or what have you. And so, when we finish an audit, we get a number that basically is based on last year's budget. How much money did we either save by not spending money, or how much money did we gain or lose by not hitting our revenue targets? So that's the key to translating audit to where we're going. And I think, I'll let Celia through the first few slides explain that. And then Melissa's going to get more into this question of bonding capacity and like how we can work towards February to have, clear sources of revenue that we can utilize when we know what the costs of the project are. So.
Thank you, Town Manager. So yes, as you heard in Oksana's presentation, the town had favorable audit results, which included an increase to total net position and sizable amount of unassigned general fund balance. The town will have about $3 million in general fund unassigned fund balance to reallocate into the current fiscal year 25-26 if desired. Staff is working on a more detailed report regarding the potential reallocation of unassigned fund balance, including information about what makes up this significant surplus. And this will be an administrative item at the February 3rd Town Council meeting to give a little more information about that. If this $3 million is reallocated to the Yountville Commons project, this, along with other available resources in the current fiscal year, could generate between $4 to $5 million of cash for use during the first phase of construction. Next slide, please. So KNN and the town have also reached out to West America, who the town has banked with for quite a long time, and they have expressed interest in providing a short-term funding strategy in the form of a line of credit for the first phase of construction. This could provide an additional $3 million for phase one construction. Should this type of short-term funding be utilized, it would then be repaid using bond proceeds when the town finances phase two of construction. An in-depth report about the Yountville Commons project funding options will also be presented to the Town Council in February when we reach funding junction. And unless the town manager would like expanded information about this.
Only thing I would add is when you see John's presentation after this, you will see diagrams that sort of help illustrate phasing. And we have been putting things into 3 phases. And I think Melissa calls them stages when she gets to your presentation, as I recall. But it's generally the same idea. And I think the goal that we've been trying to achieve is the idea of the first phase, which is in essence the horizontal, is something we could fund with cash or a line of credit, which is what she mentioned. The second phase would be bond proceeds. Phase 3, which would be after phase 2 opens, would be more what I call project financing. Melissa would talk about that, but we're not trying to fund all 3 phases with one bond. I want to be clear about that, and I think once we start to get costs, we'll be able to provide options to you in February that sort of give you those options to see, what level of bonding you're comfortable with. So when you see phases, you'll see it illustrated with John, and Melissa will refer those to stages. I'm happy to try to answer questions, but it all boils down to what's the costs, which we don't have numbers for. So,
great.
To you, Melissa. Thank you.
Great. Well, good afternoon, council members, and it's a pleasure to be back. And it's been such a pleasure working with staff on the initial conceptualization about how to think about the plan of finance for the project. But let's take a step back and just start with big picture in terms of funding public infrastructure projects. Just a few things is often the case, public infrastructure projects are advanced through some combination of resources, and borrowing isn't the first option, nor is it the only option. And as you heard with Celia, the thought is to direct some cash, and we see that often for those public agencies are fortunate, like the town, to have available cash. Grants are often directed toward projects should there be a grant source associated with the project. And then as in our role, we tend to help with the borrowing approach based on the other resources that are being directed to the project. When we think about borrowing, there's 2 different types of borrowing, and the first is an interim borrowing solution. That's often utilized when there's less certainty about the project and the overall project costs, but potentially some initial kind of funding gap or seed financing is needed. There's also long-term borrowing, and that's the debt that the town currently has outstanding. It's the issuance of bonds or some other longer-term borrowing that's typically of greater size, and it's typically done when a project is well-defined. And it could be used to refinance a portion of the interim borrowing on a long-term basis. So those are the kind of main borrowing options. And then we think about, well, what are the types of financing utilized to fund infrastructure projects? The California Constitution limits a public agency's ability to incur debt without voter approval. And so that would mean, a GO bond or a special tax bond would be required to incur debt, though there are some exceptions to that constitutional limit. That includes the use of a special fund debt, so that would be debt of your water or sewer enterprise and be repaid with resources from that special fund. And then there's also lease debt and contingent obligation debt. And that debt is typically paid from a public agency's general fund. And guess what? The town has previously issued lease debt to finance its capital projects. And many of the cities, towns, counties in California, lease debt tends to be the primary tool to finance projects simply because voter approval is hard. And so you have your outstanding 2017 lease debt. That debt refinanced 2008 debt, which funded the town center. And then you have outstanding 2020 lease debt, which is a privately placed debt instrument with West America. And that also refinanced outstanding lease debt of the town. And then you'll see in your current budget about just under $1 million of general fund resources is directed to annual debt service requirements. But importantly, after the end of fiscal 27, the 2020 debt will mature, fully mature, and so your annual debt requirements will drop down to just about $550,000. So that's kind of the framework of your existing general fund supported debt. So as we think about the town incurring additional debt associated with the project, here are my stages. We're thinking about it in tandem with the stages and the phases of the project, right? So we wouldn't initially say, let's issue X amount of debt without having a clear understanding of the project costs, and also to provide some just-in-time funding when the capital expenditures occur. So the bulk of the capital expenditures will occur probably later in the phasing of the project. But with regard to stage one, which tends to be more of the horizontal infrastructure, the expectation is that we would probably think about mostly using available town cash, and if needed, have some sort of interim borrowing facility available to cover any initial funding gap with that first stage or phase of the project. As noted earlier, West America has provided an indication of interest to lend to the town, which is great. That means that you're credit worthy and you're highly sought after. There could be other banks that would be willing to lend, and that's something we would evaluate. Any borrowing arrangement needs to be approved by council, and we would return to council with details of any interim borrowing arrangement. As it relates to stage 2 and stage 3, or phase 2 and 3 of the project, our general approach and what we're envisioning is a longer-term fixed borrowing solution for the required funding gap. So we're going to get now to reviewing just hypothetical numbers, but know and understand Brad still owes you more detailed project costs. So this is simply just to approach a framework for evaluating new debt that the town may incur from the project. These numbers do not reflect project costs. So here we go. We ran 3 scenarios based on different constraints. And so scenario 1 says, let's constrain the debt issuance based on an annual budgetary debt repayment number. And we derive that number of $1 million, and that is basically the capacity within Measure S to offset debt service in the general fund, estimated around $700,000. And we talked about your debt, your 2020 debt maturing. So that also that additional budgetary capacity as a result of not having to make payments on that 2020 debt. So that's how we got to, let's constrain a bond sizing to $1 million, a debt service of $1 million annually. Then, and that scenario in today's market, with today's interest rates, assuming the town's credit rating, assuming a 30-year borrowing, that produces project fund proceeds of just under 16 million. Then we said, what about how much additional costs would it be if we needed project fund proceeds of 30 million or even 50 million? And look, this is a framework, and we're trying to give you goalpost. But scenario 2 of targeting 30 million of project fund proceeds would result in average annual debt service, so a budgetary payment of approximately 1.9 million, and then raising 50 million of project fund proceeds would result in annual debt service of approximately 3 million. So let's put those numbers in context of affordability. So when we speak with other public agencies about incurring additional debt and the affordability of doing so, there's 2 areas that we look at. And the first is budgetary capacity, and that what a local government's budget can reasonably allow without undue stress to your budgeting. The second is market capacity, and that simply is, what will the bond market think if you went out and raised debt of X million and it created an obligation of the town of Y million each year? And there's debt metrics that rating agencies use to evaluate your credit worthiness. So a highly over-leveraged entity, which there's not a lot of those, right? Most public agencies are quite prudent, could incur a penalty, right, for being over-leveraged. I can help you with that second factor, thinking through the dynamics of credit worthiness and calculating debt ratios. The first factor, budgetary capacity, is really driven by staff and your council, and what feels reasonably okay to absorb in terms of additional budgetary costs. That's graphed here. I should have made it a full slide looking at this. But that red line, the red dotted line, says what are kind of my current general fund supported debt, right? Your budget is supporting about 900,000 of annual debt payments, plus we're going to hypothetically direct Measure S resources to offset the general fund for an additional 700,000. So that gets us to about the 1.6 million a year. That's kind of a little bit of a status quo, feeling like I have those budgetary resources and resources of another fund to repay that debt. As we start getting into scenario 2 and scenario 3, additional resources are required. So scenario 2 would require approximately 800,000 of additional town resources or budgetary resources, meaning more revenues, less expenditures. And scenario 3 would require an additional 2 million of budgetary resources or additional revenues or some other form. So that is just trying to position different scenarios, giving you different way of looking at incurring debt, and most likely from your lens from a budgetary perspective. From a market perspective, we've built a model, and we do it for other of your peers, where we map out the financials of a public agency. In this instance, we utilize the most recent audit of the town that was just reviewed with you. And we calculated various credit metrics in areas such as financial performance, reserves and liquidity, and debt and liabilities. And we can use this framework to not only evaluate your current credit worthiness, but two, evaluate the impact on your credit worthiness as you begin to incur additional debt. So this is just to suggest we have a framework as we're starting to think about new debt, and the tools we would use to help you understand market factors and debt ratios that would be reviewed. So Standard & Poor's rates the town, that's your outstanding credit rating. The town is rated AA. Your lease debt is rated just one notch below at AA minus. These are the buckets they rate you in. So debt is only 20% of their overall evaluation. We can score 4 out of the 5 buckets. The management bucket is subjective, so we don't score that because we don't have calculations and formulas to do so. But I will say, if you look in those boxes of management, budgeting practices, long-term planning, and policies, the town would probably score quite high in the management bucket. So we have done just a very preliminary scoring based on the fiscal 24 results. I think without belaboring all the scoring and going deep into the numbers, it's simply to say that your scoring still suggests that the town is a highly credit-worthy entity and would score within the AA category. And then from there, we can say, holding all else constant, using analytical tools as we begin to layer on additional debt, whether it's scenario 1, 2, 3, or the specific scenario that we might consider when the project costs are known, we can start evaluating how the additional debt may impact scoring of the town and evaluation of the town's debt ratios. So just a few concluding comments. We're often asked to do these types of analyses for public agencies, and I do find it to be very helpful in just putting a framework around the lens of our credit and the impact of debt on our credit. But ultimately, decisions about incurring additional debt really will be made in the context of budgetary capacity and what feels reasonable to what the town can support in the context of its current budget or a future budget that may have additional revenues or refined expenditures. And then affordability metrics established by the rating agencies can be reasonably evaluated in the context of your budgetary constraints. And so when viewed, we can help you in the market evaluation of the town and your credit worthiness. But really the discussion will be amongst staff and council in terms of what feels reasonably affordable for incurring additional debt associated with the project. And that's the conclusion of our presentation.
Thank you very much. So I'm going to start off because I have a question. Help me think about our lowest scores. I go to always the worst case scenario first. Typically have to do with the per capita numbers, and I know we have a very small population. So help me. But we've got. Am I correct in thinking the more per capita you have, the more housing you have, therefore the more property taxes you have, which we're just a flip-flop model.
Right.
Because we have TOT. Is that how I should think about it and not worry so much that those are some of our lowest credit scores? Is that, you want to rearrange my thinking here?
There is certainly offsetting factors within the evaluation of your credit. And I think you would score, even though your population and your per capita is lower, you score tremendously high in economy, and that is because you have a very strong property tax base and other tax base. I would say with any agency or jurisdiction or city or county, the same thing holds true, but in different buckets, right? All these factors are evaluated, but more populous entities can tend to be dragged down by other factors. So it tends to be there is, and also why not everything is put in one bucket. They're trying to, spread the scoring across different factors such that there is some sort of a balancing amongst factors like economy versus a specific metric that focuses just on per capita.
Okay, I think I've got it. So it's just kind of all part of the equation, really, not
Exactly.
that one is more meaningful or less meaningful. It's all just, you want to build that whole equation and add it all the pieces in. Okay, I got it.
Yeah, so you'll see it's within these buckets, right? The per capita metric actually falls in debt and liability. But per capita income falls in economy, where you score high. So they're all of equal weighting, right? So they do tend to balance each other out in terms of different scorings.
And then one other question regarding the pension and OPEB. I know a lot of other cities have big debt here. So on the initial S&P credit assessment scoring page here, because our numbers are favorable compared to a lot of places with problems, if their numbers were a lot higher, then that would actually increase that total percent quite a bit.
Yes.
So as we get to that percent of revenue, are these just numbers for us to evaluate, or can you make a professional recommendation? I know it's case by case, but you can take the case of Yountville in this case, because they definitely vary from 8.64 to 25.2. So what is a number that you would be very wary if we went above, rather than judging each one of these?
On your carrying kind of here on the carrying costs, right?
Right. Yeah. The debt service and liabilities as percent of revenue. That's the number.
That is the number. I
Right.
mean, because the per capita, there's nothing you can
Right.
can do about that.
Can't
and the
manufacture
rating,
people overnight.
Exactly.
I have no place to
And-
put them yet until I build the housing. Right.
Now, and it's said here, but none of this is meant to really be prescriptive.
Right.
So if you move from status quo to scenario one, I can't say, your rating won't change.
Okay.
But what I can say is, look, status quo, scenario one, and scenario two are all within range bound. So
Okay.
scenario one does not change. You're currently scored 2 in the debt in that with that carrying cost metric. Adding on scenario one, it would still be 2. Adding to scenario 3 or 2, the score is 3, just one notch below.
Right.
I can say this just anecdotally. I can't imagine that you have all these other buckets that are getting scored. So just one notch scoring on a portion of 20% of a rating ought not be a driver of a downgrade. Scenario 3 gets you further out, right? Like, so you go from a 2 to a 5 versus, and the lowest is 6, right?
Right.
So what it does help you do is like, okay, I'm getting a little bit further out of my comfort zone. I know today my comfort zone is 2, and, kind of within range bound to that feels okay. Maybe scenario 3 feels a little further out, pushing the envelope in terms of the scoring range.
And my last question now, then we've got a couple other council members. So at what point do we start factoring in, if this is really going to be an asset that will be actually, this is all, debt, there'll be revenue coming in, and how that might affect these numbers? Will that be like more March, once we really get more hard numbers? And then will there be projections about the revenue of this asset at that time? Is that
I can speak to the fact that the credit assessment will use what they call offsetting revenues.
Okay.
And so if a town or any other public agency is taking on debt to finance a project that's going to be a revenue generating project, they will take into account, as revenues are coming in, the fact that that's going to be offsetting debt, the cost of the debt, right? What is tricky is, and maybe Brad, I can't necessarily expertise what the revenues might be as a result of the project. That will be folks closer to the project. And then the second piece is, at the time of issuing the debt, right, the revenues may not have materialized yet because we haven't constructed the facilities and we don't have the rent yet. And so taking into account the benefit of the offsetting revenues may not happen at issuance of the bonds, and it may happen further along down the road, like 5 years from now.
So that's probably a better expectation. Okay,
yeah,
got it.
Yeah.
All right.
But that expectation is an important part of the credit discussion, in that they know and understand kind of your plan, not only in the immediate term, but also the longer term.
All right, thank you. So let me turn it over to Councilmember Tripp has questions.
That was a really excellent presentation. Thank you. Two things I take away, and you said this also when you came before last spring, that borrowing is not the first option. And personally, I'm not so worried about whether we can borrow 30 to 50 million, which is what we'll probably take at least. I'm more concerned about whether we should borrow and incur that long-term debt. That's really what concerns me. I have a lot of faith, especially based on what you said, that we can probably get through our credit rating and get it decent. So right now we have, as I understand it, about 11 million in outstanding debt. So now we would be adding potentially between 30 and 50 million of outstanding debt. Is that correct?
That's right. Okay. Well, based on these scenarios,
right.
And by the way, these scenarios aren't driven by the project cost.
No,
so
and
these just give you, but if this was the case, if these scenarios were driven by the project cost, then yes.
Right. This is kind of hard because it's like talking about how you're going to finance the house when you have no idea what it might cost.
What the house costs, yes.
So you at some point have to just decide. So one of the things I wanted to ask you, because you also said in the past that borrowing is not the first option. In your experience, and I've asked this pretty much the past year, we are going this alone and have decided as a town to borrow all this money to pay for this project. My understanding is in housing projects, and I did a little investigation, but it was kind of mind-boggling. There are a lot of tax credits that I think are kind of meted out by the state of California for investors who invest in housing projects. And so that gives them a boosted return. Mm-hmm. And so it can help, at the end of the day, make the project more feasible because you're getting a tax credit. And so they can get less of a return. They could take more risk. In your experience, is it, and we have decided to be our own developers, not to work with any partners. Working with partners sometimes spreads the risk and then also has economic advantages. In your experience with towns this size of 3,000 people, would they typically decide to borrow all the money and do it on their own, or do people generally, or towns, public entities, use other financing strategies that might include tax credits, which are basically kind of free money? I do know they have a lot of strings, but essentially the money is free. So that's one question I wanted to ask you.
I mean, I said it, first of all, this project is so unique, and the town is unique just in terms of your size and the complexity of your revenue streams. So that's important, right? Like, you're unique relative to other cities and towns in the state, and then the project is very unique. The workforce housing projects that we've seen, though I will have to say my expertise is not workforce housing finance, but we've seen those, generally in the school sector for teachers. And then several of our county clients have done some work around workforce housing. The schools sector has utilized, the easiest path forward is the financing off the credit of the hosting agency.
Okay.
And again, I can't say this with firm, this has an asterisk on it, but I have seen schools use GO bond authorization for workforce housing. So then that would be the more traditional approach and using the financing approach accustomed to schools. And on the county side, utilizing kind of a lease financing approach. Investor tax credit deals do get done. Often they're for large multi-family developer-driven projects. So this project is just so unique in that the town is a developer.
Okay. When you look at your analysis, and maybe this will come, we are tourist-driven and subject to downturns, putting aside catastrophes, just downturns, 15, 20%, which also affects Measure S. At what point, and you made a good point about looking at what would be required of our funding on a budget basis to support this debt and being comfortable with how that might squeeze our budget. Of course, our budget will depend on revenue.
Yeah.
And, which is really driven, yes, I don't know our percentage of property tax, but I'm guessing, I don't know. Anyway, most of it's TOT.
Right.
And so at what point will you, and I've been working in public agencies where there is a revenue squeeze, and it's really unpleasant.
For sure.
It's
yeah.
really unpleasant. It's unpleasant for the staff. It's unpleasant for the leadership. You got to cut back. No more conferences. No more fun events. At what point do you look at what impact a 10, 20% reduction due to the economy or some other factor? One of our hotels goes into a temporary bankruptcy, reorg, whatever. It's closed for a while. When do you take that into account? Or do you? Is that part of your role?
I mean, I think that's an absolutely thoughtful, approach, and should be. We should consider, and Celia even mentioned it when we started thinking about sizing around Measure S, right? And Measure S is in and around 700,000 in fiscal 25, and is it always going to be in and around that, and does it go up and down? And we should absolutely look at sensitivities to a more volatile or economic-driven revenue stream relative to a fixed obligation. Probably when we do that is when we have a better understanding of what that fixed obligation might be, and is it somewhere between scenario 1 and scenario 2, or 2 and 3, based on the different project costs that come in. But, in your shoes, I think you'd want to know how much the general fund would be at stress if Measure S declined by X percent, or maybe another Y percent. And that can certainly be done.
And you do understand Measure S works on the same formula as TOT.
Correct.
So if Measure S is going down, our
Your general
occupancy,
fund, yes.
our general fund is going down
Yes.
too. Okay.
Yes.
So I see the two as, because really the larger TOT is much more important to the general fund.
Yes, you're getting hit. A decline would more notably hit the general fund.
Right, exactly.
Versus the
Okay.
Measure S fund.
So
yes.
that's, yeah, so thank you. Those were the questions that I had. Thank you.
Yes.
Vice Mayor, questions?
Yes, and thank you very much. This was very clear in the way you explain it. Very kind. Thank you. With regards to Measure S, I'm not sure this is the time to ask about it, but is whether or not we always want to commit 100%
Yeah.
of it. I couldn't, think that in the first few years, and especially as we're looking at bonding and lending, that committing it is needed. But down the line, I would think that when we are earning revenue, that maybe we can ease the gas off of Measure S and have that amount to use for other similar opportunities, or not similar, but opportunities in town. So I don't know if that's when that discussion would happen, but while we're talking about it, that's something to look at, whether or not we want to commit it 100%.
And I will say, the analysis of bonding assumes the issuance of lease revenue bonds, so we wouldn't be committing that dollar to bondholders. So it wouldn't be a pledge on the bond. What our thought was, it would help on a general fund budgetary basis, right? It would be a transfer from the Measure S fund to the general fund. All the same, it's still the same concept, right? Like, do you want to be using all Measure S funds to offset the general fund debt service? But I did want to clarify, the expectation is we wouldn't pledge it as a security on the bonds.
So I don't see any more questions from the council, so I don't,
Here I do.
oh, yeah,
Sorry.
okay.
Thank you.
Councilmember
Sorry
Knight.
about that. Thank you very much for your report. This is for someone that doesn't do financing. It's something that's a start, but complicated, and I know I'll have to spend a lot more time on it. But as just one aspect of us when we look at this whole project, understanding the debt service, the effect on our credit rating, and how much we take in is an important first step. But you talked a little bit about how, in terms of the incomes maybe a project may create. So it seems like one of the things that maybe this is one aspect of what we're looking at, but as we gain more information from project building cost and revenues, that understanding the potential staging of a project or the potential revenue that may occur as you're staging obviously would seems like would affect our assessment scores and things like that. Was that something that that our borrower would be looking at if we presented or looked at a project that had different levels of staging of the development?
Yeah, I think that's kind of how Brad is envisioning, the approach to the project, and correct me if I'm wrong. But really to execute in phases or stages, and then have the financing kind of follow the staging of the project staging. So when the project, just the initial buildings are getting constructed, having the town's support of a borrowing to construct those initial buildings will be important, simply just because the revenue potential isn't there yet. Though there may be a stage 3 or stage 4 that may be held back, waiting for the new revenues to come in and have that second borrowing be done in tandem with an understanding of the revenues generated by the project.
It just seems like we're gathering all this information, but at some point, we're putting pencil to paper and figuring out how this pencils out, that potentially looking at staging and the revenues that generate, maybe potentially, and if the phase 2s or something could help us give us help us look at the way where our debt service is, and especially if we have concerns about downturns in economies or in the economy or something, that knowing what the potential revenues that might be coming out of the project could help alleviate some of that concern. So I feel like you've given us a good sense of understanding how important our borrowing is and our debt and the debt service and protecting our credit rating, but we still really need to gather some more information to really understand how we really look at these numbers and how we assess our S&P assessment score when we have a better sense of what potential revenues may be generated by the project. So,
yeah, just want to add a few things real quick. I keep saying February we'll have the answers, and I do think on top of what you're saying, which is of course just a preview on the sources, we are contracting like a project economist, someone that can help look at some of the project numbers, which gets you to the sort of the cash flow question, which I think is where you're asking, and that's not what Melissa does. But we are going to have someone as a third party that will help with market analysis and kind of talk about rents and unit mix, et cetera. So that is coming, and I think that will sort of open a window that I think everyone wants to see. The other thing, having been through credit rating and having gone through this several times, I think you can confirm this, but I think basically if the town commits to moving forward, there's like a 3 to 6 month process that leads up to issuing debt. And within that 3 to 6 month process, the credit agencies will likely come here, interview all of us, and address your credit rating. And things that have not been factored, and one of the sort of misnomers of when I looked at the chart that you have, I don't know if you flip back to that, your sort of 5 boxes or 4 boxes. The next one over. What's the slide that has the numbers?
Oh,
anyway, there was a slide that was sort of a little bit of no, it's not that one. It's the one after the boxes.
Sorry.
Yeah, that one right there. So when you see, 1 is good, 4 is bad. When you look at the second one down, you see a 4. You're like, why did we get a 4? And the reason was because it's a 3-year average, and we purchased the school site with $11 million of cash, as you all know, a couple of years ago. So when we did that, our fund balances shifted. So when we're ready to issue debt, if we're ready, like that will have gone out, and that number will likely go back into the sort of the 1-2 range. Similarly, I'll start with what the council did, with the handbook to establish governance. These things are factored in terms of meetings. More importantly, when we created reserve levels, that was a policy decision this council made. The 20% emergency, the 15%. There's also a budget contingency. All of those factors will go into our credit rating, and they haven't been here, I don't know, clearly since I've been here. I don't know the last time they kind of came, and because usually they only come when you're going to issue debt. Otherwise, they just look at numbers, that are part of your audit numbers and other numbers that are provided, and they just come up with a score. And again, we're already a AA credit. So I do think we can improve before we get to that point because of the reasons I'm stating. And then I think most importantly, back to what I said originally, our goal is to come to you in February, not with a pure recommendation, but with options. And I think the options will match up all the things we're talking about. This is just the top line of what's available. You will also see, what I call project financing, but I don't see project financing being relevant till phase 3. Because the reality of phases 1 and 2, phase 1 is mostly horizontal. There's no revenue coming off of phase 1. You're going to have value in the pads you built, so you could collateralize those. But when you finish phase 2, and that might be 2A, 2B, 2C, it doesn't mean like everything gets built. You will start generating revenue. And depending on rent levels, and this is where the economist will help, we'll be able to look at, okay, what net revenue is coming from the project, and how can that be leveraged for phases 2B or phase 3. So that's really important. And I think most important to phase 1 and phase 2, we will be at a decision point in February, March, which the council will have options. But I would never recommend us building the horizontal or the phase 1 without a commitment to build phase 2. Because we're not going to just move dirt around and stare at pads for 5 years. We need a commitment. And so this is where the cash on hand and the bonding capacity are things that are now something you're seeing. And when you see the whole picture, you'll be able to sort of say, okay, this is where my comfort level is based on all of those trade-offs. So I think, this is, again, top line. Know that there's a ton of work going on to make sure that those numbers that you see in February are good numbers, and that we can feel really confident as a staff saying, hey, if you choose to do this, we can execute. And, this is where I think we are unique in terms of being a developer, but I also think we are unique in the terms of this project being so critical to the town, being, obviously our civic center on top of parks and things that we envision as a community. So housing will help drive it once we build it, but ultimately, to me, it's phases 1 and 2 that we're really sort of trying to drill down and decide what we're comfortable funding.
I have one more question from Councilmember Tripp.
Actually, I have 2 questions, and these are for probably for Brad and maybe Gary. My first one is on the Measure S, and I've asked you about this before, Brad, but I was on the Measure S committee for a while, and of course this is, I think it's 1% that gets added to TOT just for workforce housing beneath the ordinance or the vote that everybody took to put that in place. We agreed to have a committee that will review the expenditures, and that's the Measure S committee, and I was on that for a while. Very important. But I'm not right. The Measure S money has been used also for other purposes, to buy houses, do kind of opportunistic when something becomes available. I have spoken to Measure S people. I know some of them have other ideas. So my question is, at what point will they have any role or a decision be made, kind of following up on what Robin said, that we should use all of the Measure S money for this project as opposed to having any Measure S money available to do other things?
Yeah, I think this is a council decision.
And when would that get made?
I think February is when we'll present options, and if you decide we want to, only push 80% or 70% of Measure S, then that, obviously it affects your capacity. So you're making those trade-off decisions. I also point out, I think Melissa sort of mentioned, we're not going to, in essence, pledge that money. It's sort of part of the whole underwriting equation. And don't forget, we do see trend lines that show growth. Especially if you go back 10 years. So Measure S should grow. Now, we can talk about setbacks and all the, sort of the economic sort of woes, but I do think you have to look at kind of the growth of it. And what are you going to pledge will be the council's decision, once we get to that point where I can show you all of these options. And I think that's your role as a policymaker to decide. I also feel you have to look at the history of Measure S and things that we have done and the money that we've done a few what I call AC rehab projects. You acquire, you rehab, you rent them out, at low income levels. I think we've done 2, as I recall, So 2 versus how many units can you actually create by bonding. So I think those are the trade-offs that will be before you in February. And, we're open to ideas, just so you know, in terms of we've considered ideas for Measure S funding. But truthfully, obviously the leverage that it creates to build, workforce housing, what it was intended to do, what we're proposing to do, will be the best bang for your buck in terms of unit count. Now, again, do you want to have a different approach? That's up to you, and we can provide those options to you when the February-March timeframe comes around.
Yeah, and I don't have a strong opinion one way or another. I just feel for purposes of transparency and then having been asked, I need to ask. And when will the Measure S committee, I don't know if we call it a committee, ever have a chance, or is this to give their opinion or approval? I know it's pretty much after the fact, their approval of things that we do. But my question is not just legally, but practically, will this go before them at some point? Before we make a decision?
Financing?
The question of whether we plan to use all the Measure S, because it's a big part of the budget.
Yeah, I think I think we've been twice. We've had conversations. Now we're getting into brass tacks in terms of numbers. But I think I guess the intended purpose of the committee is to look at expenditures, in hindsight, right? To make sure that they are eligible, in essence, I think is how I read the whatever the
The Oversight Committee.
well, but
and
what
the
was
law.
voted on,
Right.
you know,
And
whatever the language was in the ballot. But I also think, like, yeah, I mean, I have no problem talking to them about, okay, here's trade-offs and options, on getting their input because they serve in some advisory role. We've tried to actually morph them into more of an advisory role because they weren't really doing anything
Right.
when I got here. So I have no problem with that, but ultimately it's your decision, you know, and I think that's where, you know, how much process do you want to get to a decision point? That's all up to you. But I think, you know, we're getting there, and I think, again, February, March, like, okay, here's a spectrum. I'm happy to, it's going to get complicated with, okay, if you use 80% of Measure S or 60%, you know, here's your bonding capacity. I'm sure you could build that into the model, and we could show that to you. Yeah, and in the meantime, I would like to hear from anyone. This is anyone in the community wants to tell me, here's a use of Measure S that I think would be a good use of the funds, because we've had it for 6 years, and we've done, you know, two
I've
deals.
heard, right. Yeah. Okay. Well,
I mean,
that's
I'd be
good
open
know.
to hearing
So
that, like, hey, here's another source or use for that. And then we can consider that. But right now, there's no other, at least, ideas on the table. We considered one as a council, and we decided to pass. And I think, like, there's always AC rehab deals to be done. That's generally, I think, in my experience, how, you know, little bits of money get done. Because when you have a big project like this, you need to patch together a bunch of funding sources. You're not going to just do it with Measure S.
So it basically, at the bottom line, it's a council decision and will likely get made in February or March. Okay. And then my other question is, I have a couple civil engineers in my family who've worked in governmental entities, and when I described the kind of the chicken and egg problem of trying to figure all this out and how much we want to encumber our future for this project, and one of them said to me, well, there'll be a stage where you do, because as I said, it's like buying a house with no idea, and we're pretty committed to buying this house at this point, but we don't know what it's going to cost. So they said to me, well, there'll be a stage where you do value engineering, which basically would say, you know, we don't want to spend $60 million. You know, we're going to spend $30 million and build 2 buildings or whatever. Because, you know, we just don't want to burden our budget in the future. We like to have a little flexibility. It's been really helpful for Yountville. Thanks to much, and my hat is off to the mayor and previous management, we have the luxury of pulling $11 million out to buy this. So it's nice to have that luxury. So I don't want to see that luxury go totally away. So maybe a budget discussion, as we've heard, goes on amongst the council, which at the end of the day is really a big responsibility. What opportunity, now that a lot of this has been engineered and designed, to say, well, you know, we don't want all this commercial space, or we want something a little smaller, or, you know, we don't need 8,000 more square feet of community space. We've got 3,000 people in Yountville, a lot of visitors who have nice hotel amenities. What do we really need all this more space? Are we ever going to is that discussion going to go on at some point?
Sure.
Or has it happened? I mean,
Well,
I don't think it's happened because I've been here.
Well, but I think we have a design team, and we're trying to design a project that is very cost efficient in terms of construction type. I mean, we have Brendan and we have John in the audience. They can expound on this later during the presentation. I think the design build process that we also adopted as a council gives us the flexibility of, once we look at these proposals, we can then work with these entities to do value engineering. You know what, the number's too high. Like, how can we cut $5 million out of this number? Give us ideas of how you know, this gets into, oh, maybe you have to compromise some materials or do less. I mean, there's all of that needs to happen once we have, to me, contractor numbers. And I've been hesitant, as you know, to provide design estimates. We will have engineer estimates. We don't have them yet, but we will have them, and they will be good, but they won't be, to me, enough to start value engineering, because when we get that best value numbers, which will be before February, assuming we continue to move forward, we will have this opportunity to value engineer. The other thing I will say is phase 3, as I keep saying, is not going to be part of your initial financing. And where most of the civic space, you talk about 8,000 square feet, right, is the ground floor of phase 3. So you'll have a whole nother opportunity. And I think
phase 3 is just
all the buildings on Yount Street.
All
so
the
it's
buildings
those 3
on Yount,
buildings.
and not residential. Those aren't residential.
No, there's residential on the second
phase 3,
floor.
Okay. So
those phase 3 buildings are not going to be, at least based on my understanding right now, because I generally kind of, because of now we have these capacity numbers, like we're not going to be able to afford to, and we wouldn't really want to build all 3 phases at once. So you're going to have or the community, I should say, will have another opportunity to really look at phase 3. And because, Brendan's still here, the whole form-based approach that he's been, articulating, pontificating on since the beginning is the idea of flexibility. So if the ground floor of the Yonge Street buildings wanted to be residential, it could. If we decided, hey, the demand's so high, why would we do any civic amenities? We need more studios, or we need more one-bedrooms. That opportunity exists. It is somewhat of a value engineering, but to me it's like more of a, okay, we've now actually built something. We have a much better feel. I think like the Food Hub and Yountville Fit, or what I guess the Coop and Yountville Fit, are to me 2 examples of things that we did for the community that have been well received. Like we're now looking at the opportunity of maybe building a pool. If Yountville Fit only had 40 members, we wouldn't be talking about a pool, right? I don't think. I think we'd be like, that wasn't a good investment. So I think all of those things are sort of value engineering in a way, but the technical term value engineering to me is when you have a builder who's in the room, like how do we value engineer things so that we can cut costs on a budget we can't afford? And I'm sensitive to that term.
When will we get a budget? I mean,
February.
One thing to do might be to figure out what we want to pay and then what we could build.
But we've gone through 2 years to get to this point where we're going to move forward with a design build process where we will actually get best value bids, and those will be numbers that you can count on versus me hiring someone to estimate costs based on rough designs, which will not be numbers that you can count on. So we could value engineer numbers based on preliminary designs with engineers, but it's not going to ever get you the certainty I think that you need in order to make a debt decision. So again, February, you will have all that. That's what I'm trying to say. Okay,
and so in February, if the feeling was we only wanted to borrow $30 million and at this current time build XYZ, because we like having a little budget flexibility, we don't want to get totally encumbered, that would happen in February?
Yeah, you'll have options in February that will be relative to your cost. And also the value engineering thing, what I was going to say is, we've done, a lot of people have built a lot of things. Value engineering is scary to me just because the town has fallen in love with so many things. Trees, we call it frosting, whatever, these little amenities that value engineering is where that stuff always goes out the window. And then everyone asks, well, what happened to that tree that I saw in the rendering? Well, we had to value engineer it out because we could only afford, a 10-gallon versus the 100-gallon tree that everyone saw. So I don't want to compromise quality. I do think you'll have the issue of microphasing, as I call it. Like you could do 2A, 2B, 2C. It'll cost you more money because it'll take longer. But that might be the approach that the council feels good about because we don't want to value engineer phase 2. We want to make it in bite-sized pieces so we can build it a little more responsibly but maintain the quality standards that I think the town is expecting.
Well, I'm all for, I'll just finish and then I'm all for a high quality project, and I might have used the wrong term. I was trying to say if it came to the point that we wanted to have the project fit a budget that we decided we were comfortable with in terms of the size of the project, so maybe I used value engineering incorrectly. I just wanted to know when that decision could be made.
Yeah.
And we're saying February.
Yeah, it will be February. And I probably would lean you more towards microphasing, which is 2A, 2B, 2C versus value engineering. But those are all things we'll be prepared to discuss in a couple of months.
So I have some questions from the Vice Mayor, and then we want to go to Council Member Knight, and then we're going to go to the public. So you're up.
Just a quick question. I know the pool it has gone back to PRAC, and numbers are being researched a little greater. But ultimately, where are we thinking that? Phase 1 or 2? Because early on it was like we got to decide if we're moving Earth. But
yeah, what you'll see in John's presentation is I think the rough pool, I'll call it, which is just the grading, the underground plumbing, the what they call shotcrete, which is not a finished pool, would be phase 1 because that's, if we can afford it, the right time to build it because you're moving dirt around and you got all the equipment to do that. And then phase 2 would be where the finish is. So it wouldn't open until phase 2, but we would build it in those that would be the most cost-effective way to build it.
If it was decided it's a go.
But if it's on the edge, because I've said in that meeting it's $1 million investment, it's not $500,000. I think it's roughly 500, just so you know. So if you wanted to, if we felt comfortable that we could finance 500 in phase 1 and 500 in phase 2, then you'll have a pool. But it will be, it'll take 18 months to build. It's not going to be ready in 6 months.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Knight.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to come back to, thank you very much for your presentation. And the reason I broached that conversation about project staging and all that, and I appreciated town managers kind of refreshing us on the bigger picture of the project, because when you look at financing and debt service and all that, it's complicated and gets like a little worrisome when it's not in a part of an understanding of a whole project, where like the questions that Councilmember Tripp asked, asking about when we'll be making decisions and how we eventually will talk about potential staging of a project. It all factors into this budgeting, and that was I appreciate your report and the fact this is just one part of a lot more information we'll see in the next 4 months or so. Thank you.
Yeah, happy.
Okay, thanks, and we'll ask for anybody from the public who would like to come up and ask some questions. Okay, Mr. Public.
Alan Tencher. I really appreciate how thoughtful and direct, frank, to be frank, this conversation has been. I appreciate your comments about Measure S, as well as yours about, well, bring some ideas, because I have heard from members of the commission they aren't real fond of the idea of everything being committed forever, but it wouldn't have to be. But anyway, that's not my main point. My main point, and I've had this before, if you really want to understand the budget, you also have this other piece, and that is the operator. And I know you have, is it under contract? No. That's going to be really critical. You need to either move forward with the RFQ process for the operator, or you need to get that economist on board. Otherwise, in February, you're not going to have a very important piece of the puzzle, which is it 7% that they want, or is it 17% or they want? And without that, even if you have great numbers for what it's going to cost to build, you don't know what it's going to cost to operate, which is directly going to impact your revenue stream. So,
okay, thank you for your comment. Any other public comment? We'll bring it back to council. Any final comments before we receive and file this report? Councilmember Reeves.
I just wanted to say that I really appreciate all of the numbers that we've received today and all of the sort of clarification of how those numbers impact certain aspects of this proposed project. And I think we all want all the information all at once, but that's just not possible. And the fact that we have some time to mull this over before we receive the next glut of information, in order to make a better decision once we've kind of figured out, well, what would my comfort zone be? What would I like to see, and how much of that would I like to see? I think this sort of step-by-step approach that the town manager has engineered for us over our impatience is really good, because we weren't ready to receive this before. So it's always that chicken and egg thing that happens for every big decision. So I am grateful for this process, and some people have said, oh, you guys are moving so fast. But I don't think that's the case. We're moving at the pace where we can digest and realize what's of value and what's not of value. So I really appreciate the approach and the fact that as we get more able to receive them, we're getting more and more specific numbers to make decisions with. So thank you.
And I just want to add another kind of factor into all this too that I want all of us to kind of keep in our minds. Really, we are building workforce housing. These are going to be workers that are going to maybe take care of our veterans. They're going to be workers who, in the hotels and the restaurants, and that is all going to contribute to our economy overall. So, and it seems a little intangible, but I think it's a real reality that, we're not really doing this to make money, but making money from bringing in workforce people who can really live here is going to generate money. And so I just want us to kind of keep that in mind too. There's a lot of stuff that sometimes, a little risk-taking will be, you'll look back and maybe it was wise, and maybe there'll be a lot of other factors, a big earthquake that I've always worried about living here that will make that risk-taking not a good idea. So I think that's why we have 5 council members. We're going to have a lot of questions and a lot of opinions, and we certainly want to hear from our public as well. But I think and I appreciate, because every time we have these big meetings and big discussions, there is sometimes even the council needs to be reminded, oh yeah, we learned that before. So I appreciate staff and Brad for being patient with us as we sometimes need a little more clarity putting these pieces together. So with that, I'm going to receive and file this report and move on to our only staff presentation, which is the Yountville Commons project. We've got a theme going here tonight. I'm sure there's some money in here somewhere. Design, build, procurement with an RFQ, RFP update, and project entitlement preview. So we said all that, but CEQA is lurking behind all of this, I'm sure. So,
well, I'll set this up, and I feel sorry. I want to apologize to Aaron and John for saying a lot of the things that I know they're planning to say. But and you'll see some more illustrations I think will be useful to what I've just kind of talked about related to phasing. But we have Aaron Heacock, our planning and building director, and Aaron has been, really working hard on what you'll see and what will be available to the public on Friday in terms of the CEQA packet. And obviously, you all know John, our town engineer and public works director, who, along with Gary and Brendan and Sean Grinnell, who's not here, and I think we had we had 3 members of the public, including Alan Tencher and a member of Measure S and from PRAC, help with the RFQ process. We're now transitioning to RFP because that's when the real numbers come. But I just feel like the team, and I think the support, Alan always gets participant or resident of the year award for me because not only are you in all the meetings, but you sat through all the interviews and you're able to kind of see what we went through. The only thing I wanted to say, and I think Aaron's going to go first and John, and this is, again, preview stuff. We're not asking you to make any decisions, but it's very useful information as we work towards February. I think the short list, which is something that was vetted and will be public on Friday, was something that, we need to share with all of, there was 9, John will go through this, there's 4. We're not going to announce the 4 until Friday, and the reason for that is we have to notify them in a legal manner. We didn't want them to just hear about it through a council meeting. So you will see that information on Friday, and won't see that tonight. So I just want to make that clear, and that's the reason, and Gary can opine to that. We talked about it, but I think ultimately we need to give them a legal notice of whether they were shortlisted or not. But I feel like, truthfully, the 9, I almost could have picked any of the 9. And so it feel like this is like my wife and I are watching The Voice, this, who are the finalists? They're all great, who do you pick at the very end? I was to me, and this is speaking for myself, and I, Alan, we could all speak differently, at least 7, could have been. So it's a very hard decision to make, but the really great news is we have 4 really, really qualified design build entities that are going to give us really good, reliable numbers that speak to everything I was just saying in the last presentation. So with that, I'll turn it over to Aaron and John to go through their deck.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. So this, as Brad alluded to, just a brief preview of the entitlements package that's going to be going to the ZDRB next Tuesday and then to you on January 13th. So quickly, the first entitlement is the general plan amendment. So we have to amend the general plan land use element to include a new commons land use designation and to amend a few policies related to height restrictions. Additionally, we have to amend the general plan land use map to change the project site, which is currently designated public facilities and parks and play fields, to the new commons district. Similarly, zoning code and zoning map amendments to include the creation of the new common zoning district, zoning text additions and amendments to account for that new district, and amendment to the zoning map to include the new commons land use designation or zoning designation. Additionally, the tentative subdivision map, so how the site is going to be subdivided. So it's going to be going from what's existing now as 2 parcels to 18 individual parcels. And the largest of those new parcels will be parcel 1, which is just over 130,000 square feet. And that's largely going to consist of open space and parking areas. And the remaining 17 parcels will accommodate project-related buildings and will range in size from just over 4,000 square feet to just over 40,000 square feet. And finally, CEQA, California Environmental Quality Act. So the approval of an adoption of an addendum to the 2019 final environmental impact report for the Envision Yountville General Plan will be needed to be approved. And just quickly, so this is showing the land use map and the general plan, and you can see on the left there, there's no common zoning district. It's parks and play fields and public facilities. And then on the right, you can see the new commons land use designation has been added, and then the colors have been changed on the map to correspond to that. And this is a copy of the proposed tentative subdivision map. Little hard to tell the lines on this version of it, but that's essentially how we're proposing the site to be subdivided. And I think I'm going to turn it over to John here.
Thank you, Aaron. As we've been talking about in the previous presentations, you've heard staging, you've heard phasing. And so conceptually, obviously all of this is subject to revision, but conceptually the project team has been working on this and has come up with a fairly, what I believe is a very feasible phasing plan. And stepping back 1 minute, I want to say we've used this word design the project and design build. I think a better way to think about it is this group has been very careful defining the project that we want, but the actual design of that project is still coming. And so putting numbers to a design that hasn't been built, it hasn't been created yet, is hard to do. So we've been very diligent in defining a project that the town wants, but the details of the design are still pending. So with that, this phasing conversation, we say, oh, horizontal and this, that, the next thing. So phase 1, everybody knows the site. Phase 1, we're going to demo that building right there. The other 2 buildings are going to stay open and operation. Town hall will stay open and operating. And then we're going to grade the entire back part of the project. And construction phasing, you grade it to the new elevations, and then you put the utilities in. So we'll grade the site to the design that we want and then put the utilities in. And then we are going to construct some things in phase 1. Most significantly, we'll reconstruct the parking lot in its new configuration right here behind Town Hall. The farm stand will remain open. We will construct the new dog park along Fennell as part of this design in phase 1. And then we will, as part of phase 1, construct one of the prototypical buildings that will be coming in phase 2. The value of that is we understand how long it will take that building to be constructed. It'll be a demonstration model so people can understand what's coming, and it will help educate what's going to happen in phase 2. And so phase 2 really is, if we do phase 2 all at once, is the construction of the Creekside Village, and that's the housing that gets constructed in the back, and its appurtenances, including the North Grove parking lot, the oval in the middle, and the other things around, the dog park, town hall, the new parking lot, the buildings in the front are going to remain open during Phase 2 construction, as will the Hopper Creek Trail. And so Phase 2, in general terms, is the Creekside Village in the back where all the grass is right now. And then Phase 3, when we get there, is the Yount Street Arcade, which will include those buildings in the front along Yount Street in what is now essentially the parking lot for the Yountville Fit and Schmidt Hall. And so at the time we're building Phase 3, really, Creekside Village is open and occupied, and Phase 3 is out here. And so that's, in general terms, how the phasing that we've been talking about for this entire meeting is intended to play out, assuming the funding supports it in that manner. And so you'll all recall in June, the town council adopted a design build policy to allow us to do this in the design build fashion versus the design bid build fashion. And so that policy informs us staff on how to go about this process. It really defines what you've been hearing from us, the RFQ and the RFP. The RFQ is the request for qualifications, and then the RFP is the request for proposals. And it defines the procedures that we need to follow to comply with Public Contract Code, which is solicit, qualify, evaluate, and select the candidates for a design build contract for the project. And just remember the conversations that we've been having all along, especially back in June when we adopted this policy. Design build gives us, the town, greater flexibility in selecting the entity that will deliver the highest quality project that we want for the Yountville Commons. So design bid build locks you into that lowest bidder, and you kind of lose control of things, and then you end up in a change order contest to get the project that you thought you were getting when they bid it and they were the low bidder. So design build is the way to get to the project that we in Yountville expect and want. And you've heard the phrase best value and how this best value selection process works. It's defined in the policy that you adopted in June, and it sets objective criteria based on price, the features, the functions, the life cycle, the experience of the contractor, and the past performance of the design build entity. And those criteria are set in the RFP document that we are preparing to publish. And it will define criteria that each of the applicants will get graded on, and we will come up with a number value that says this particular design build entity is the best value of the 4 that we've received. Those criteria are overall approach to the project, how they're going to meet our schedule, the life cycle cost of the things that they're going to build, their design concepts and building systems that fit into our defined project that we want. And then, is it a contractor that has any exceptions or qualifications to our contract? Are they taking exceptions to the contract that we're asking them to enter into? And then in this process, we do have individual meetings with each proposing team to learn about their approach and learn about them and have a better understanding of them before they submit their proposal. And so where we are now, as Brad was alluding to earlier and outlined in the process, we published an RFQ and to attract interested design build entities, and the RFQ included preliminary design concepts, our performance specifications, and what we want the project to be in terms of size, functionality, and aesthetics. And then they received that and put together a package that says, this is why our team is qualified to build that project for you. We published it in the town's virtual plan room, which then goes to plan rooms throughout the state and actually out of state. And so at the end of the solicitation period, we had 81 plan holders. That means 81 different companies or entities received our RFQ and were contemplating our project. And so out of that, we, as Brad alluded to earlier, we received 9 submittals from qualified potential design build entities. town staff, coupled with the chairs of the 3 boards, interviewed each of those and evaluated them based on their experience, technical capability, financial stability, and demonstrated success with similar projects. And we are on the verge of publishing that short list of the 4 design build entities that we will now invite with an RFP. The process is also defined in that same policy, where after we've shortlisted our design build entities, we invite those entities to submit proposals for design and construction services for this thing that we've been talking about. And that thing that we've been talking about is a project that is consistent with the description that you just heard from Aaron, that you've been hearing all along. And it's subject to minor revisions as it goes through the CEQA process, but we all, I think, have a general understanding, thanks to Brendan and company, of what this project really looks like and what the town wants it to be. And so we will receive proposals that will include their comprehensive design approach, their cost estimates, their schedule, and any value-added features that they think will benefit the project. The town will evaluate those submissions using that best value methodology that we spoke to earlier. And then once we've arrived at somebody and we said, yes, this is the people that we're going to enter into a contract with, that has to come to town council to get approved. So council will have to authorize that contract with that design build entity. And then once we do that, the town can then issue a notice to proceed for phase 1 of the project. And then as phase 1 progresses, we can, as a group, determine, are we going to issue a notice to proceed for phase 2 and when we're going to do that? And then are we going to issue a notice to proceed for phase 3 or phase 2A, 2B, and then phase 3? It will evolve over time, but we will follow this path mostly in general terms to get there. And so back to the train ride that we're all on, next stop really in the process is sequestration, which is Aaron's the keeper of sequestration, and then RFP grade, which we're putting the final pieces of that RFP together and getting ready to publish it later this week or early next week. And so that's a summary of where we are in the process and the phasing. So I'll hand it to Brad to add anything.
Yeah, the only thing thank you both. Thorough information. I think the only thing I would add as relates to flexibility, and one of the, I think, strong attributes of a design build process is the ability, I can't remember what you called it, but you can have meetings with the contractors. This will allow sort of the value engineering question. So we can literally, meet with them and say, hey, you know what, we saw your original number. We need to figure out how we're going to trim $5 million off the number. Show us how you can do that. We could have 2 of them do that based on how I read the rules there. And I think, again, we're not going to get to a point where I'm going to recommend that we can't build phase 1 and phase 2. Okay, so we'll give you options, but phase 2 is really, as we look at how much and all of those questions, going to be sort of this core thing. And by having 4 really qualified people that we can work with through a process over the next 2 months, we will bring forward numbers that you can trust. And I think, for me, that's the most important thing. And I think what's a little misleading in terms of the train metaphor, thanks for bringing it back, John, is until, RFP grade, it shows it blue. Well, actually, RFP grade is us finishing all of, because the other thing to understand about design build is we recommend a design build. We have to award it. All the money has to be in place. We all feel good. Let's just call this March or April. They have to finish the design, and they actually have to get the permits, okay? So they don't start building right away. So this is why it's sort of a grade, and that's why I think we refer to it as Lawyer Mountain. Like, ultimately, you really don't see shovels in the ground until you get over Lawyer Mountain, which means, like, all of the permits have to be in place, the design build entity has to be in line, a lot of things have to happen as you go up RFP grade. So so that's just a clarification. Maybe it should be a yellow and blue stripe through that section, because we won't commit to construction until we have a permitted, obviously set with a builder that's within our budget. But thank you for all that. That was really great, and we're happy to answer any questions.
Okay, I have a first quick question, and we've got my little boxes lighting up. So I'm just very, very curious how parcel 1 is the most interesting parcel I've ever seen created, ever. And I've looked at a lot of LAFCO documents. It seems to touch the northern, southern, east, and the western boundary of this parcel. So it just...
It's everything that doesn't have a building on it.
Yeah, I know that, but it's like, does it really have to be this complicated? Because it just is everywhere. I'm just thinking...
Well,
somehow moving forward is like, oh, and look at this. We got to like,
yeah, I mean,
I don't know.
For us, that's clearly the public parcel, no matter what.
Okay.
I think everything else could be, we can talk about leases, we can talk about ownership structure, et cetera. So, yeah, it was driven by what was left over. So
Okay,
it wasn't
right.
drawn from the beginning. It was drawn.
Right.
We drew all these other lines, and there was, in some cases, parcels that had to be created for PG&E reasons. There was a lot of reasons or basis for the parcel map. So I wouldn't. I mean, we can talk about it, but I don't think it matters. It's just like town hall is always going to be public. I mean, parcel 4, parcel 1. You can look at certain parcels and you can realize, like, if the town wanted to do something down the road to, like, do a partnership for parcel 2 or parcel, 14, you could do that.
I guess we can make lot line adjustments in the future if once we realize, well, what have we done here? Okay.
You could do that too.
Yeah.
But there was a lot of thought that went into this
Yes,
parcel.
okay. It's very creative, so whoever did it's like, okay. Let's see, Councilmember Tripp, questions?
So I guess one of my questions is, and the CEQA, I've not seen the package, and I've not seen the project description, which I understand under CEQA is going to be pretty detailed about the project, number of units, size of buildings, that sort of thing. And I understand the CEQA. So that will come out. We'll have 4 days, and I think the CEQA document will be, at least 50 pages. So it'll be very complicated. It'll come out on Friday. ZDRB will go on the 9th, which is 5 days later. And then, of course, we're at Christmas time, and then the council is going to approve it in January. So as both the January 13th. So that's a short time frame for some important documents. As both a participant now in the public process and also when things happened in my neighborhood as a resident, I kept my eye on when the point of no return is. In other words, things are happening in the process that you cannot go back on. And then secondly, when are the policy decision makers participating and making a formal decision? Because when the policymakers make a formal decision, that is when the public can really have an impact when they show up. So I've asked Gary several times, probably ad nauseum, when did the council approve the number of units, the type of units, that 80% are going to be studios and 1-bedrooms? When did the council approve that? And I think I have a handle on it. We've taken 3 actions, and I'm just going to recount this because I spent a lot of time thinking about this. We approved a conceptual plan in March, I think. Doesn't really matter. This spring. The conceptual plan, and I went back and looked at the meeting, had no specifics on the number of units, no specifics on the type of units, 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom, no specifics on parking. So it was a conceptual approval. We approved spending, and I have no problem with this, $2.5 million on planning this spring. That was a formal council action. And we approved the design build. So what I still am struggling with, to be quite candid, and as our member of the public pointed out, Frank, is people come up to me and they say, oh, I love this idea. We're going to have some more families in Yountville. I'm like, well, we've got 80% studios and then some 1-bedrooms. So not really families. Oh, senior housing. Well, could be seniors, but they're going to have to walk a long ways with groceries and there's no elevators. So I guess my question is, when this gets approved, and it will be a complicated package, is that the point of no return in terms of anybody having any opinions on the, and I know we're building, what do you call it, flexible, form-based, which is I really hate those kind of terms because it makes people just go home and say no problem. Form-based architecture, but I think the CEQA and everything that will be coming in the next 6 weeks, the rubber is hitting the road. Although we have a huge amount of momentum, and people have accused me of being impatient, but my observation of the public process is sometimes when things gather momentum, it becomes too late to ask the questions. It comes too late to revisit things. So it's a dance between when you get information and when you don't. And I guess I want to ask, is this the junction where we will actually, as a council, decide that we want to build 80% studios and the rest one-bedrooms? And I do understand workforce housing, but I'm not sure the community really understands that. And then my question is are we locked into that in this CEQA process? Because that will happen in the next 6 weeks. Because I've not seen the project description. And many people in the community that I talk to, and I say, well, what do you think about the commons? What do you think? Oh, I love senior housing. I love family housing. All sorts of things. So as a council, I've never, and I'll get off my soapbox, but we are not allowed to speak to each other. So I don't really know what Pam thinks about 80% studios. I don't really know what anybody thinks about basically building housing that won't, I guess you could have a child in a one-bedroom and a couple, but that's pretty tight. I've never really heard us discuss parking, and I'm going to come out with a letter to the editor about the net 56 units of 56 parking spaces net. If you add, this is above what's here now, for 150 units, 8,000 square feet of public community space, about 6,000 square feet. Again, I'm just taking this out of John's report because I have not seen a project description. 6,000 feet of retail space. So we're going to add 56 parking spaces for all of that activity. I'd like to have a discussion about that. And so my question is, when will we have that discussion, and is the rubber hitting the road on this next? Because we haven't taken any formal council action other than the 3 I described. So will this be the point at which we say, yes, we agree that is the plan, and yes, we agree the parking makes sense, and yes, we agree we're going to build all studios and a few one-bedrooms? So and I'm just being frank because I've been here the whole time and I've never had a chance to really hear some of the discussion on that. And then my final thing is, yes, we had a huge, and I applaud the amount of public input we've gotten, and we went through a whole phase of it again in late summer. We didn't ever have any discussion about what the public said. There was no reporting out. There was no council discussion. So public input is great, but if we don't get a chance to discuss what we heard, or because we have a consultant who hears all this, so I guess for purposes of the limited, and I'll get off my soapbox, is the CEQA action coming up in the next 6 weeks during Christmas? Is this where rubber hits the road, and once it's rezoned and we pass it, that is what the council will have approved in terms of the project? Now, I haven't seen the project description, but that's my question. And so.
Want me to go?
Sure.
All right. So the CEQA document will be the ceiling, not the floor. So there will be an addendum to the EIR for the general plan. That'll be released on Friday for the ZDRB meeting. They will make a recommendation to you all, and then you all will vote on it at your meeting in January. So that will be the maximum that you can do, what's in that project description and analyzed in that addendum. But you can do less, and you can do variations within the ceiling that's in that addendum. So that's the CEQA document. These other entitlements, which include the zoning change and the map and the zoning map change, allow for the land use that will be different over here. Because right now you have a 6.8 acre parcel, half of which is zoned parks and playfields, half of which is zoned public facilities, and it doesn't allow what this project is proposing. So that's why there needs to be a new zone, change to the zoning code, change to the zoning map. So that will allow the use that you all are proposing, but it doesn't actually approve anything. In the same way that you can rezone a parcel anywhere in town, it doesn't mean that something will happen there. It just means that it's allowed on that parcel, and then someone can come and apply for it. Once those things are in place, Town staff will continue to go through the RFP process, which I think you'll have a little more info on it during this presentation, but that's what this is about. Someone will be selected on the other side of that. There will be confidential meetings that occur. State law allows for those, and that's to protect the competitiveness of the process. So the other proposers don't get that information because there's a back and forth on the scope and the price and the other things that occur. Eventually, at the end of this process, there will be a best value, and there's a process for determining what the best value is. Normally in these projects, if you weren't using design build, you would have to select the lowest responsible bidder. Best value does not require that. So there will be someone that comes on the other side of this. When that comes, only the council can approve the agreement, and that agreement is what will lock you in to answer your question about that process. And at that point, you could choose to make revisions. You could give different direction to staff. You could also do it at an earlier stage too. Okay. But you're not locked in, to your point, on the number of units or the exact specifics until you vote to approve that agreement and we sign it, and then the contractor goes. Even then, there's still some leeway once you're in the project. The agreement as currently drafted allows for multiple phases. It doesn't lock you into 3, which is what's been described here. You can do as many phases as the town decides to do, and there can be revision. It's one of the benefits of doing design build. But you are going down a path, I think the question you're asking, when you officially approve that agreement.
So basically, there won't be any discussion or formal council action that the public can participate in until we are letting the construction contract.
Well, unless the town or the town council chooses to do that before then.
And so the public would have a chance to come in and voice their views as the rubber is really hitting the road at the time, as currently designed, we let the contract, correct?
Well, I wouldn't necessarily say as currently designed. That is a step that has to occur.
Right.
The town council must vote to approve the agreement, and at that point, you will be under contract for someone to build something. But you can, this council can, have discussions in addition to that. There's nothing
in terms of the ceiling, once the zoning is changed, though, and that ceiling will exist long beyond when any of us might still be up here, in terms of, especially if we phase it. So once it's zoned for 150 units with this parking design, that will exist in permanent. I mean, I know you can change the zoning, but we are basically approving the idea of 150 units, correct? Or whatever I haven't seen the project description. In fact, all I've seen is conceptual plans. So
yeah, well, the ceiling actually lives in the CEQA document, not in the zoning.
Okay.
But the zoning is permanent only in the sense that any of your zoning is permanent. So you can always go through the ZDRB process with an ordinance and change zoning or density or setbacks or anything else whenever this council chooses.
So I guess my question to Brad and Gary and also our planning director is, if the public did have thoughts on specifics, none of which have been really publicly announced or seen by council and the public, specifics on this project that will come out now in the CEQA, the 50-page document, as well as all the planning. My question is, when would they come to have an opinion and see the results of all the feedback and have a chance to express to all of us what they think and us to discuss it amongst ourselves?
Well, I think if it's, obviously every meeting is an opportunity for the public to come and express themselves. Specific to the items that are agendized, CEQA is, I think Gary and all the other project entitlements sort of get into the zoning and the ceilings. If you want to talk about the unit mix and the rents and the parking levels, like that's the February, March discussion where we have, like I keep saying, all the options that we can present that we feel comfortable as a staff recommending in terms of funding. So I think that's, to me, that conversation, but I think there is okay, if the council decided, we want the ceiling to go down to 100 because we're uncomfortable with 150, you have that power in January to, adjust the numbers that are part of the project description, but those are ceiling numbers. So, and they could come today and say, I'm worried about parking, like I'm worried about this, I'm worried about that. We have listened for 2 years to a lot of people that are worried about a lot of things, and we've tried through the process to address those. I mean, we're not hiding from any concern. So I feel like they can call me tomorrow, but in a process where the council is here, tonight's another example. We're talking about money. We're talking about what's before you. We have a few members of the council here, the community here, and so people can say what they want, but I don't feel like we're going to get you or the council the answers you want until February, because that's where the rubber meets the road, to use your phrase, because that's where we decide, here are your options. Are we moving forward? And I think those are, to me, where I keep saying I have to have all the answers in February, and I intend to. So.
Well, and this is in no way a criticism of the efforts that have been put forward, because they've been significant and we have some really good expertise. I just want to be sure that what gets built reflects what people really want, and mostly that we have a discussion. At the end of the day, it might look exactly like what's been proposed, but I'm not sure that this is just my feeling, we have really had a thorough discussion of some of these issues. So, thank you.
Vice Mayor. And then Councilmember Knight.
Collect my thoughts for a second here. So I am really appreciative of all of the time that the professional committee and the volunteers from Lisa, Alan, Scott to go through 81 submissions.
We had 81 people were holding the plans, but 9 formal submissions were made.
Oh, okay. I was like, oh my God. All right. So they held the plan, so they were thinking about it for a minute.
Yes.
And then only 9 got serious. Okay. Well, to boil it down to 4 still, I know that's no small project. I'm really interested in best value. And you say here that it's objective. And I, as an engineer, which is not any way, shape, my mind, I can see that the price, features, and functions, those kind of things are very, very objective. Where does subjectivity maybe play a role? And as you, your team looks through the 4 serious submissions, are you scoring each individually? So it's going to come down to a numbers games of
Yes.
Your guts on.
So the RFP defines there's 2 submittals that they have to make, the technical submittal and the price proposal.
Mm-hmm.
And so the RFP scores the technical submittal on those categories that were listed there. And each of those bullet points has a number associated with it.
Okay.
And so the interview panel, whoever that may be, will score each of the applicants on each of those bullet points. And then separately, we open the price proposals, and there's a formula that it was a little complicated, so I didn't put it on the slide.
Yeah.
There's a formula associated with calculating the price associated with relative to the other prices that we receive.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me. So the combination of those 2 gives us a number that says this is the best value proposal.
Okay. Do we know that the team yet? Is it still the team that was in the staff report that from Brandon to you, Aaron?
Yes.
Yeah, the final evaluation team.
Yeah, we talked what I called, the color, whatever we call ourselves.
The dream team?
Whatever, the panel that worked together. It's going to be much more technical and time consuming.
Yeah.
So we'll figure out the right point in time to check in to say, okay, based on everything we've heard, this gets into the confidential meetings, et cetera.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously John, myself, Gary has been very involved in a lot of the, at least the legal aspects, but it's a very complicated thing. And then, we have Brendan and Sean, who we pay by the hour, so I try to get value out of them too. We did sit in a room for 2.5 days together. So that has a cost to the town. So I feel like, you know, I'm mindful of that. So it kind of depends, you know, and I think, you know, clearly John, Gary, and I will always be on the forefront. And then we have our hired help that helps, and then we have our volunteers. So back to what I said earlier, like, we have 4 really good options out of the 9. We have 9 really good options. So I think this is going to, you know, pay off over time, and you'll see in February, like, okay, here's the rationale, here's the you know, the formula that got us to, you know, the recommendation that we make to you.
Okay, thank you. And then with the, kind of circling back to what Councilmember Tripp said, with the form-based, I like that, you know, design flexibility. But when we are doing, say, the plumbing in phase 1, and we have, when will it be decided that this is going to be 2 studios next door to each other, or a 1-bedroom, which, as I understand, the 2 studios will be the 2 squares, the 1-bedroom will kind of take up that space. Is that going to make a difference for the plumbing?
No, we're putting in the, excuse me, we're putting in, I mean, John can opine, but we're putting in the infrastructure. There'll be plenty, depending on, up to the 150 units, of course, but yeah, that won't be an issue before. The infrastructure in phase 1 will be able, because, you know, you always overbuild it anyway. I mean, it's the reality, you know, but I don't know, John, what's your...
Well, I mean, specific to the building, yes. Once the contractor will know I'm building this L-shaped building with 3 studios and 4 1-bedroom apartments. I know that's probably not the right number, Brendan, but they'll know as they're going to construct that what the unit mix is, and the plumbing will happen at that time. When they're framing the building, they'll know what the unit mix is for that particular building, and the plumbing goes after the framing. And so they'll have the shape of the building, the skeleton of the building will drive, the unit mix will drive the skeleton of the building, and the plumbing for that individual building will get built with the building.
That makes sense.
Yes.
When do we, the collective we, make the decision of how many studios, how many 1-bedrooms, and such?
It goes back to February. We'll present options to you. We will also be gathering market research in terms of demand. So when you say yes to phase 1, and whether it's 2 or 2A, you will make that decision.
And we'll have that further input that will help us make that decision. Yes. We're not just basing it on hunches.
No.
Okay. Yeah. That's the part I needed to hear again.
We're going to coin flip.
And John, I want to just compliment you in the clarity of what you said, you know, what we've approved thus far is the design. And the next step will be, we've defined it and then design it. That helped, if I could say it straight. So thank you very much.
Councilmember Knight.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Director Ferns, for your report, and Director Heacock, I appreciate that. I just feel comfortable where we're at, and I appreciate the questions that Councilmember Tripp is asking, because I feel I'm comfortable with the CEQA process that ZDRB and we'll see, and where we're at here with a design build program, because as the town attorney said, we're approving CEQA, which is the ceiling, not the flooring. So we've designed a general plan for this property that I'm comfortable with now. I'm comfortable with a CEQA process that creates the flexibility for up to 150 units, because I know the value that it'll bring to the community. I know the need that we have in this community for people, as the mayor said, that it could be years before the state would build housing at the vets home, that we might be able to provide housing for CNAs that work at the vets home, for people that work in our hotels and the restaurants, and that value is only going to get more needed in the future as it gets more expensive to live in California and the Napa Valley. So I feel comfortable where we're at, that we're building and looking at options, and that there will come a time that I'll want to put pencil to paper and figure out, and have a conversation about how we phase this project, and how a mix of studios versus one-bedroom work. And when we do phase one and you bring sewer pipe and everything to a plot in the land, you don't worry about necessarily about what type of piping you need, sewer line and water and everything in the building until you're actually at phase two and you're building the stick and you're building the structure, and then you're coming into the building. So we'll be, that's a conversation we'll have before we get there, before we make that contract with the builder we choose. We'll have had a conversation about how comfortable we are with the mix in phase two or phase 2A, B, C, whatever. And so I feel like we've really developed, the town manager is really, and the staff has really helped us build a process to make good decisions, and we're gathering information. And it's a tough project, but and it's a difficult project, but we're putting the information, I think, together and the right steps to give us, at one point, a conversation that we can talk about what we really want to see in the final, in the end, on this property. And so I'm comfortable where we're going. I just had a kind of a curious question and it's amazing you had 81 plan holders and then you got down to 9. But I noticed in the 9, and I guess we'll find out soon who the 4 will be, is that of the 9, there was like 5 of them use RSA and 4 of them use Piatalk. Are these engineering firms or designers or something that are working with all these other groups and they're all really comfortable with RSA and Piatalk because that's why they're a part of these different group builders?
So they're a design build entity by state law requires a contractor, an architect, and an engineer to create a design build entity. And so for the most part, these contractors, engineers, and architects have worked on other similar projects together as a team. And so there are 3 separate companies that come together to form a design build entity and then sign the contract as one entity with the town. And so in the building industry in the North Bay, these companies have worked together successfully on other projects and have familiarity with the Napa Valley, for example.
Yeah, so it tells me like Piatalk or RSA, or so they have.
Yes.
Is RSA in Napa?
Yes, RSA
is the
RSA Plus is the civil engineering company that's based in the city of Napa.
Right. So these people know the valley,
Yes.
and so they brought people together that understand how to build, and obviously how to value and to build to good value for their customers so
Correct.
Good.
Yeah, just to add a key point, we did allow architects and engineers to be on multiple teams, but we were clear that the contractors are individuals. So no contractor could be like on 2 teams. So we had 9 specific general contractors because that's really the key, and then they were able, if they chose, to
pull together the other team members.
To pull together, yeah. And I think in some cases maybe RSA was recruiting contractors. You never know exactly how that works, but we did have 9 unique general contractors, and there was a little bit of that mixed matching of the architects and the engineers.
Okay. Good. Thank you.
I have some comments, but first I want to make sure we go to the public. Do we have any public who would like to make some comments? Mr. Public, are you coming? Yeah, thank you.
Alan Tencher. I feel quite close to the project. I think I understand it. But I'm not sure everybody really does. And there's been a lot of outreach. And people have busy lives and they make other choices. You've heard me say that before with other things. But we have an expert in communication, and we have identified some areas where there may be confusion within the community about what exactly we're thinking about, especially with respect to no senior housing, and that the mix is largely going to be 1 bedroom and studios, which has implications, although people from other towns have said, you're going to have 3 people or 4 people in that 1 bedroom, you know, and so, well, if that's true, we need to make sure that our operator is clear on that. But anyway, to not dilute my point is maybe this is an opportunity. It's up to you guys that are leading the charge to decide to maybe reach out and say, okay, we don't want to derail the train because that's going to cost us money. And before I forget, I'd hate to see you cut down that 150 units for any reason in CEQA. It's a ceiling. We may need that to have this project be affordable. But anyway, reach out through the sun, but the sun isn't the medium that it once was in terms of people having paper in hand. But the town has a lot of resources, a lot of contacts to just maybe the list of everybody that had the 1,000,000 cups of coffee, to just send out a blast and say, here's what the next 3 months look like. It's absolutely critical that you refocus your attention. I know it's the holidays. Well, maybe some afternoon you take a minute and you read it. But anyway, just an opportunity because I'd hate to see the train get derailed.
Okay, thank you. I just want to kind of give you my thoughts on this whole project. And I think some of us have already kind of said it already. I think this is just remarkable that we are really having this kind of detailed kind of conversation. I mean, it doesn't seem that long ago to me, this 7.5 acre site, you know, next door to us and behind us, and we were just, you know, starting to buy it, and look what we're, you know, having these kind of conversations now. So good for us, good for Yountville, I think. And, you know, we're protecting these trees, and I think this is going to be just an amazing thing. Most of these things, once you get somebody built, it's kind of like barren. So, you know, and we're reusing the buildings. In the beginning, we even had some conversations. We're going to knock all these down and do all this stuff. But we thought, well, wait a minute. No, there's some great uses here. And we've kind of created those. And people were able to, you know, shortly after we bought it, start really using this stuff. We've got a lot of new in this. I know we have a lot of parks, but we're going to have even more parks. And like, you know, it's amazing that we can kind of have this, and new homes for, you know, workforce housing. I just can't say how unique and important I think this is. And this has just been so overlooked everywhere. We have a lot, in my opinion, senior housing. We've got 2 mobile home park, manufactured home parks that we specifically added senior overlays years ago on. They weren't, you know, and they've been protected. We've got this incredible veterans home for seniors, and this is really time for, I think, you know, the people that have, you know, been working, that can't afford to live here. It's, you know, I think it's their time, and it's, if we have to get some more people interested or knowledgeable about that, then we can do that. But that's really, I think that's really going to be kind of minor in terms of really kind of what we're doing. And all these unit mixes that we're even talking about, I don't think we can really predict right now. I guess we're going to get some more information from people out there in the public. But at least we've got those to kind of play with. So, and the architecture style, I think, we'll see what the ZDRB has to say. I just think it's very exciting from what I've seen so far, and it fits so well into Yountville, and it's unique and it's different, and it really, I'm very excited about it. Also, this phase construction, I think this is going to be something that is really going to be important for all of us to kind of weigh in on, and we've got a lot of pieces of information I know that's kind of coming. And, you know, I really like the idea that I've heard that maybe we might have people living on this property in the first building we put up, maybe in 2027, which is also going to be quite remarkable. So I think we just have to really keep our eye on the ball of really what Yountville is doing here. And we'll work through all these other things, and, you know, we'll, you know, figure out what the most important thing is, maybe some more outreach, and we'll figure out how to do that. But I'm very excited about it. So, Thanks for everybody for all your long hours you're putting in to it, reminding us, helping us, and just a big thanks from me. Vice Mayor, comments?
Yeah, to just underscore what the birthday girl said, this is unique. And when I was at Cal Cities a few months ago and in Long Beach, you sit, we had a North Bay meeting, and it was able to sit with legal counsel and council members from Benicia, Vacaville, Santa Rosa. And, you all formally kind of, well, what's going on in your town? And when I was able to express just at a high level what we're doing, people's heads literally like, wow, you're doing that. And when you come together with other city leaders and there's awards that happen for cities that find solutions, this is something that has not been done before. So it is unique. And if it had been done before, we'd have another path to follow and some examples. But the fact that we're one of the first ones doing this does mean that there are some conversations that need to be frank and need to happen. In Nextdoor, that dreaded app, I see other towns in the valley that way fighting about hotel rooms. And, we are so far past that, but in the threads and trying to just learn and glean information, somebody said, well, we don't want to be soulless Yountville. And people were like, yeah. And I took all of my restraint not to say anything. But I'm like, here we are working with neighbors to overcome any NIMBYism. I think everybody in the town wants workforce housing. And here we are supporting, helping people find workforce solutions in living, and the cost of insurance, the cost of vehicles, and savings of money. And if we do this right, we're helping people get a leg up. Not only are they going to work here and we'll have the opportunities to support our employers here with the best employees possible because they have the best benefits of housing, but because they're going to be able to save money. And in the future, maybe we won't be sitting up here, but we might hear about the people that moved here in 2027 that in late 2030, or at some point, they're able to buy a house in California, which we all know is, as a big dream for the younger generations. So what we're doing, again, is really unique. And other cities, we're so going to watch what you're doing. So.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. Let's move on to item 13, council external meeting reports. I have one from MBTA. We met on November the 19th. First, a Caltrans update. I know many of us have driven from Yountville north, and there's a patch of Highway 29. You just about fall off the road. Either you go into the lane going in the opposite direction or off the side. I've been whining a lot, and Caltrans is finally taking a look at it, and they will start repairing that, we hear, in March. So that is truly coming. And also the bee bus, they've given it a new name. They've named it after Hillary's dog Poppy, or the state flower, whichever way you want to look at it. So there you have it. So the bee bus soon will be called Poppy. So that's my update, council updates. Any other meeting updates? Yes, Councilmember Reeves.
We met, the Climate Action Committee met on the 21st, and we had some informational items, and one of them was from MCE, which is our aggregator for power. And I think the biggest takeaway is that MCE is providing a lot of support for transition to electrical utility and appliances and things like that. So they have an app on their website where you can access current rebates and how you might stack rebates and how you might get a really good deal if you are in need of a new appliance or something for your home, so that you can make that transition gracefully. They also talked about participation in their light green service and their deep green service, and that Yountville is a little bit ahead of the rest of the Napa Valley towns in their participation in deep green. And I think if more people looked at their bill and looked at what MCE is offering in terms of reusable energy, or I forget what the term is now, but not fossil fuel. None of the fossil fuel is used for deep green service, so that's an option for people to do, to take a personal investment in helping the climate. And also the one of the things that we were talking about was the need for electrical chargers, and especially for communities that depend on tourist visitation, and the fact that there is a deficit of chargers. There are programs for multifamily and some governmental agencies to get charging stations subsidized by MCE and the state. But one of the things that was talked about was that the real investment needs to be made in superchargers, because that's what visitors need, other than the level 2 chargers, which would be great if you were staying overnight. But we do get a lot of day trippers, and now that I know what it's like to drive an electric car, I'm like, okay, a supercharger would be really good right about now. So I think that's something we also have to keep in mind with what our plans are for the commons and what our plans are for other areas in town that we might be able to invest in charging systems that would enable our visitors to feel comfortable visiting here.
Councilmember Knight.
Just briefly, a couple weeks ago, I said I was going to go to a Sister City International conference. I went. It was on a Saturday in Orinda. They have a beautiful facility there in the Wilder Center. And maybe someday we could talk about the community. There may be interested residents that are interested in being involved. I talked to a number of people that have sister city programs running in their city that work a little bit, have a connection with the town, but they don't belong to the Sister City International group because it's fairly expensive. But it was interesting to talk to a lot of folks from Vallejo were there, that they have a lot of sister cities. I met a gentleman that runs a sister city program in Gilroy, and his great-grandfather was Frederick Franz of Franz Valley, and his grandfather was actually born in Yountville, so all that history and all that. So, but I want to thank the town, the communication, and for Cammie and Hillary, and for everyone for putting together, finding the resolutions of the 4 cities that we, over the years, had created short-term relationships with. And so maybe someday there might be residents that are interested in getting involved in that, but it was good to see how cities are and how the organization is coming back after COVID. So,
okay.
Thank you.
Great, thanks, Councilmember Tripp.
I like the idea of a sister city, Eric. We get to decide who gets to go visit it, huh? No. This is a quick report. I represent Yountville on the Upper Valley Waste Management Board, which oversees the Clover Flat landfill and the disposal services for Yountville, St. Helena, Calistoga and the unincorporated areas. I'm just going to report really quickly. The board asked for a report and this issue's been in the news somewhat lately, about a settlement with the landfill operator that came about after the Napa County DA's department filed a complaint against them, basically, and Gary can correct me if I have any of the details wrong, relating to a release of contaminants into seasonal streams up by the Clover Flat landfill, most of which I think happened in March of 2019. And as a result of and I believe it's a criminal complaint that was filed, because it was filed by the DA against the landfill corporation that's operating it. They agreed to reached a settlement, not a trial. They agreed to be enjoined from future pollutant releases and agreed to, of course, notify the right authorities when they do have releases into seasonal streams or otherwise. And as part of the settlement, it's come out publicly that there was an $8 million settlement, but the information from the DA, I can't exactly resolve the differences. What I understand is that there was an agreement for that there would be environmental remediation at the Clover Flat landfill of over 4 acres of remediation. In addition, there was an agreement to pay for off-site restoration projects related to different stream areas within Napa County, and the agreement totaled approximately $2.6 million that the landfill entity that operates it now would agree to do. In addition, a $500,000 penalty, of which I think they get $400,000 back if they complete and basically play by the rules. So that has been something that's been discussed publicly. So I wanted to report out what was reported to the board members, and also at the upcoming meeting in December, I think it's the 15th, there was a request made. Has been a federal lawsuit filed against the landfill operator relating to workplace and OSHA violations primarily, but also discrimination against employees. And the California League of Latin American Citizens, who represents a lot of Latin American workers, a number of whom actually work in hazardous waste and waste disposal, has requested the opportunity to come to address the board about issues relating to the operation of the Clover Flat landfill. And so that will happen if anybody's interested at the next meeting. We'll receive a presentation by LULAC. And then in closing, just in my review of some of the OSHA information, it does appear that OSHA has agreed that there are issues up there in terms of the operations, but that things have improved. And so that's good news. And also the Clover Flat landfill will be closed, and it will be an expensive and extensive process. But my understanding is that it will still serve as a transfer station for waste. So they'll transfer the garbage, for lack of a better word, to trucks, and then likely it will go to the Potrero Hills facility in Suisun. I can never say it correctly. Suisun, thank you. So that is the end of the report about the Clover Flat landfill and the Upper Valley Waste Management. But I also would encourage people such as Ms. Tencher, who spoke a little bit about the waste issues, to feel free to reach out. I have found both the management at the county level and also the landfill management to be pretty good about responding, but I would certainly help with any questions or resolution. So is there anything to add on that, Gary? Thank you.
Okay, so with that, I am going to ask we adjourn our regular town council meeting until Tuesday, January 13th, 2026. There we go, at 3 p.m. So can we get a motion in a second?
I move.
I second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstain? All right.
Happy holidays.
That's a wrap. Thank you.